You have found the season premiere of the Lines Survivor podcast. Steven Andrus here, managing editor of thelines.com, joined this week by the author of the weekly Survivor probability tool on thelines.com, lead writer Mo Nawara. Subbing in, we'll usually have Matt Brown on this show this week. He'll be back next week. Great to have the author of that fantastic article, in my opinion, the leading Survivor strategy article on the web. The numbers back it up too. Mo, great to have you, man. How are you?
Thanks. I'm excited for the season. Been very excited. Been thrilling to get back in the mix for NFL, man.
I love it. Absolutely. Cannot wait. Survivor, always have the dream at the beginning of the year. All of our dreams mostly shatter at some point, but in this episode, we are going to go through some overall strategies for the 2023 season. We will also get into our picks for week one Survivor, looking at some of the obvious ones, maybe the not so obvious ones, and a reminder to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening on the podcast feed. If you're listening on the podcast feed and you find this helpful, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. It goes a long way. And if you're watching on YouTube, check the links in the description. We have, for week one in the description, all the different Survivor pool options that are out there that you can sign up for. That's down there. And each week we'll also include in the description Mo's weekly Survivor strategy guide and his Win Probabilities tool. In other words, what he does, looks at the betting market, converts money lines into implied probabilities to let you know what the market is saying in terms of the teams that are most likely to win each and every week. So let's kick things off here, Mo, just with some overall strategy for Survivor this season in 2023. Whether it's this year or previous years, what's maybe one or two staples that you like to keep in mind as you're trying to win a Survivor pool?
So if you're trying to win the pool, don't be afraid to take some risks. I would say that's probably a big one. I think something that stuck with me was from 2 years ago in the Circus Survivor when it got to Thanksgiving, and I think Dallas was -7 against the Raiders, and basically the entire pool, I don't know if it was the entire pool. A lot of people had used Dallas, but something like 50 to 70% of the pool took Dallas, and one absolutely aggressive maniac took the Raiders because it just, -7 favorite, you're like minus, 350 or whatever, -400. The other side's +300. Like, the Raiders have a legit shot in that game. Like, they're 7-point dogs, but they're, whatever it is, 25% to win, which when you factor in how many people are taking the other side, I mean, that's way more EV to take the Raiders than Dallas, right? Because if you take Dallas, everybody gets through, you don't gain anything. If you take the Raiders and they win, like, you have way more equity that 1/4 of the time they win than the 3/4 of the time you get Dallas through. And the Raiders won. So that person ended up gaining like hundreds of thousands of dollars in EV, So I think just not being afraid to be aggressive is a big one. I've taken it to heart, and, I just tried to talk my buddies off the Buffalo game a couple of years ago with Jacksonville, and they wouldn't listen to me. We took Buffalo. Buffalo lost. And, I just think don't be afraid. That's the big one. Don't be afraid to go bust. Losing is not a big deal because only one person gets to win, so you're probably going to lose. So you might as well give yourself the best chance to win.
Mo and his buddies are in the Circus Survivor every year, the big Survivor pool out in Las Vegas. They play in that every season, so they have big money on the line going for a monster. What is it, a $6 million prize, Mo? Something like that?
Yeah, I think this year it's $6 million.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you have to be in Vegas to have somebody to register for you, have a proxy for the rest of you out there. Again, those pools that are available nationwide are down in the description. You can check those out. But Mo, this begs a follow-up question. You mentioned not being afraid to take a risk if you're deep into the season. Are you still preaching that right at the start of the year, or are you being much more conservative to start the year for like the first month or so?
I think there's arguments both ways. For me, I have taken the safe approach. This year, I think I'm going to be a little more aggressive. But it just depends, like, what I'm seeing and how I feel about the teams that week. Like,
Does it also depend on how big your pool is? Because, like, I think there's a big difference between a massive pool, national pool, like the ESPN or Circa Survivor, versus like a pool of like 20 people with your buddies.
yeah, definitely in general, you want to be way more aggressive the bigger the pool is because it's just going to be harder to get through. So, it's just like picking NCAA brackets. If you're in a pool of thousands of people, you need to pick some crazy Final Four teams if you want to give yourself the most EV,
Mhm.
expected value for those who are not into the gambling lingo. But yeah, if you're in a pool with 20 of your friends, you can be a little more chalky and still win. So maybe just differentiate one or two spots. But I would say this year, I just really want to play with Washington early, even though obviously pinning your hopes on Sam Howell is very risky. A lot can go wrong there. In past years, I've definitely been a little more conservative early on. A lot of it depends on what the schedule looks like, and this is a weird year. I think you said you were going to talk about that because of Arizona is such a outlier and how bad they could potentially be. So, could be a little bit of I would say a little more maybe boring this year than some past seasons.
For sure. And we're going to get into the highest probability teams for week one in just a moment. But the last piece of advice I would give for Survivor going into this year is just to make sure you know the rules of your pool. Most of the kind of casual pools are very simple. You can only pick one team every week. And then once you pick them, you can't pick them again. But some pools, once you get to a certain point late in the season, may require you to pick two teams in a given week. The Circa one out in Vegas, they have special mini weeks for the holidays around Thanksgiving. So just make sure you know the rules. And if there's caveats like that, look at the schedule for those particular weeks and then figure out who you may need to save for that point later in the season. For most of us, it's pretty straightforward. You're just picking one team every week, but just double check your rules to make sure you know what's going on there.
Another one is probably pools with rebuys. I know one of my friends plays in one where first 4 weeks you're allowed to rebuy, and I would say just be way more aggressive in that sort of format because all the EV is going to come later because people are just going to rebuy. So you want to have all the good teams saved up for later. After the rebuys are over, you want to try to get through with some of the weaker teams early on if you can.
Absolutely. And the other thing we'll mention too, and Mo's going to cover this in his column as they pop up, but some of the national sites like DraftKings that have survivor pools, they will have like second chance survivor pools, not necessarily rebuying into the same pool, but they'll just create another survivor pool in like week 5 or 6, and you can start all over again if you got busted in an earlier one. So we'll be sure to include those links in Mo's column as well as they pop up along the way. Okay, Mo, let's get into week one Survivor here and the teams that have the highest probability. Looking at your column, there were two that stood out the most, as you termed the obvious chalk. The first is the Ravens, who have a minus 500 money line, implied win probability of 80% against the Houston Texans. And then maybe a team that's a little less obvious considering they have a win total of 6.5, but again, potentially this strategy of fading the Cardinals in a lot of weeks this season, which seems like the elephant in the room that nobody in the league wants to talk about, but everybody outside the league is acknowledging that Arizona is trying as best they can to tank. So the Commanders play Arizona week one, implied win probability of 72%, money line minus 300. Are you going to take one of these two teams in a massive pool or maybe your friendly pool just to try and get off to a good start here? Because it seems like these are the top two most popular picks. My guess is the Ravens will probably be the most popular considering they are a 10-point favorite, the biggest favorite of week one. But how do you feel about these two teams?
Yeah, if you just want to get through, the Ravens are the play. I think I'm not going to take the Ravens though. There's a good reason to take the Ravens. I would say, most likely to get through and in the Circa pool, which is the one I'm in. I believe Washington has a holiday game. I think it's on Thanksgiving. So obviously you're not likely to take Washington in these games. I think it was against Dallas, but you never know if a situation like the Raiders comes up last year, or maybe Dak Prescott gets hurt. These things happen all the time during football season. So something to consider for sure. That being said, I really like Washington. As we can see with our friends at survivorgrid.com, they have 0 stars for the rest of the season. That means they have absolutely no future value. They are projected to be underdogs, I believe, in every game besides home Chicago. So given that, I think it's a tremendous spot to use Washington. They are at home. They do have a decent defense against what should be a very bad Arizona offense. At the same time, you have to acknowledge going into it that Sam Howell could be absolutely awful. We have a 1-game sample. He played well. I thought he played well. I watched some of that game, and he definitely was playing pretty decent. But, I mean, it could just be a fluke, like Dallas didn't have a whole lot to play for, I don't think, in that game. Maybe some minor seeding considerations last year, and maybe Sam Howell is just the worst quarterback in the NFL. That's definitely possible. And if he turns the ball over 3 times, the Cardinals can probably beat Washington. I mean, I wouldn't say easily, but it wouldn't surprise anybody for sure at that point. So big error bars around this game. I know Washington's a big favorite, but they're definitely at risk of losing when you have a team like this.
To your point, though, I just checked the Commanders' schedule, and I legitimately would not feel comfortable using them in Survivor until like week 15 when they play the Rams. Maybe the Rams have packed it in at that point. Every other week until then, I'm not comfortable. So I'm totally satisfied with being aggressive right out of the gates here and using the Commanders in week 1. If Arizona ends my Survivor hopes in week 1, I just say, I tip my cap and say, well, I guess I probably wasn't going to win anyway. So whatever, man. I mean, especially considering that there's a pretty good chance here based on the projections we're seeing that the Commanders will not be the most popular team this week. And my kind of overall goal every week is to, at the very least, not pick the most popular pick. Not pick the most popular team. If I could do that, then I'm at least doing some basic game theory and figuring out how to move along here. So I'm okay with the Cardinals in week 1. I'm okay with the Commanders in week 1 being the second most popular pick. And then we kind of go from there. Just looking at the ESPN picks right now that have come in, and again, we're recording on Wednesday, so these are subject to change, but at least gives you an idea. The Ravens are 27% picked in the nationwide ESPN Survivor contest, and the Commanders are 13% picked, so less than half at the moment. So I'm totally fine with taking the Commanders at this point. Let's move down to maybe some less obvious picks, but still pretty decent favorites in week 1. There's a long list of options here, all with greater than 60% implied win probability. Chiefs, week 1, Thursday night against Detroit. Maybe less likely with the Travis Kelce situation right now. Seahawks against the Rams, who probably won't have Cooper Kupp. Vikings hosting Tampa Bay, which if you go and listen to Mo and Eli Hershkovich on the Beat the Closing Number podcast, they are taking Tampa Bay to cover the spread in that game, but that's not the same as winning outright. So we'll see about that in a moment. Jaguars on the road at Indy against a very raw quarterback in Anthony Richardson and a depleted, to say the very least, defense in the secondary for the Colts. Eagles at New England, and lastly, Broncos at home against Las Vegas. Which of these, Mo, would you feel most comfortable with if you are going to not take the top 2 obvious chalk of the Ravens or Commanders?
I like the Seahawks. Very low on this Rams team. I know that fading divisional underdogs can be pretty much the worst in these, but the Rams without Cooper Kupp are they're basically trash. I mean, they're just a really bad team. So, yeah, this is a team that's basically built around 3 people, Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald. So if any one of them is not in the game, that is a very massive hit to this team, where a team like the Chiefs, I mean, yeah, Travis Kelce is a massive part of the pass catching, but like they still have an elite quarterback, a great coach, great players everywhere, or at least good players everywhere. The Chiefs, I'm still confident, are a very good team without Travis Kelce. But the Rams were already considered to be a pretty weak team with Cooper Cup. Without Cooper Cup, I think they're going to be absolutely awful, and the Seahawks are very likely winners. Only thing is, though, they get, obviously, because they play in the NFC West, they get Arizona at home down the road. So that week also looks pretty bad for Survivor. Like, they're the only projected favorite more than a touchdown. They're the only one even projected to be favored by 6 points. And the second is the Chiefs against the Chargers, which I don't think anybody is ever excited to take the Chiefs against the Chargers, since all of those games are always decided by a field goal. I feel like the Chiefs usually win, but they always win by 3. So yeah, that's something to consider. I mean, Arizona, like, everyone's going to save Seattle for that game, I think, at the same time. So if you feel that way and you feel like you can find another winner in that week, I think using Seattle is good because you're off the beaten path a little bit for week 1 and you still have a very likely winner.
I completely agree with you. They would be my top pick from this list. There's a lot of teams here that, despite the implied win probability, I'd feel pretty queasy about. It's not just the Travis Kelce injury that popped up. The Chiefs don't have Chris Jones. They're breaking in 2 new tackles who should be fine when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, but um, there's at least a little bit of question marks there. And again, the obvious of the future value of the Chiefs down the road here. Vikings against Tampa wouldn't shock me in the least if Tampa pulls an upset there. I mean, the market is very low on the Vikings. Win total of 8.5 after they won 13 games a year ago. And I think you and I are both down on Tampa overall for the season, but as constructed right now in week 1 where everybody's healthy, I think the defense is well above average. They have 2 fantastic receivers. So they're not one of the bottom 2 teams yet at this point, in my opinion. Eagles
Yeah,
against
totally
New
agree.
England,
I could see the Bucks being absolutely god awful at some point,
but not
but
yet.
it's not there yet. This is a medium strength, slightly below average roster, probably. Like, they're
I
not that
agree.
bad yet.
I agree. Completely agree. I think they're not too far behind the Vikings. And if you look at my power rankings, it's you'll probably see that as well. I think I have the Vikings 16 maybe and Tampa around 24 or so, which is a lot higher than you would expect considering that they are the second lowest win total this year. So, but this is a 1 week situation we're looking at here. Jaguars against Indy. I want to, yeah, I want to save Jacksonville for down the road. Anthony Richardson, I think, has the ability to kind of turn this into a schoolyard game at times. He was really good in college at avoiding sacks, and the Jaguars' defense is, at least their secondary, suspect enough. So I just want to see Jacksonville kind of get into the flow a little bit, and a lot of future value with teams in their division down the road here potentially. Eagles against New England. There's going to be a lot better spots to take Philly down the road. And Broncos against Las Vegas, to be honest with you, was the most surprising line move leading up to week 1 I've seen this year. This was a pick 'em around a pick 'em when it opened in the summer. And we've gone up to like 3.5, 4.5 before some buyback here. I just disagree with that. I think Las Vegas is very live in this game. I don't know what you think.
Not as high, I don't think, on Las Vegas, but large range of outcomes, I think, for the Broncos. I mean, if Russell Wilson cleans things up, this could be a very good team, but if he plays like he did last year, they're going to be pretty bad again. And yeah, I don't know. You're not excited to use Denver down the road. They do play Houston, but it's on the road. I kind of like Denver second week. They host Washington, so
Mm-hmm.
that might be a sneaky one right there. But yeah, divisional spots. I mean, at home it's a little better. Like, there's no way I would ever click Jacksonville. I'm like the lowest in the world on the Colts. I'm still never ever clicking Jacksonville week 1.
Yeah, fair enough. Jacksonville has a lot of shiny toys, right? But there's a couple of foundational situations here where you get a little nervous with their secondary and their offensive line. So we'll see what happens there with Jacksonville. All right, let's move down here finally to the real contrarian plays potentially. Um, let's start with the Falcons against Carolina and the Bears against Green Bay. Still remains to be seen if the Bears are going to close a favorite against Green Bay. That's closer to a pick 'em at this point. But 2 teams that, at least as we record on Wednesday morning, have implied probabilities of greater than 50%. Small favorites, we'll term them. Are you tempted to take either of these over the Commanders or the Seahawks?
I'm personally not, but I could totally understand somebody taking Atlanta. Um, they are obviously decent favorites, -3.5 at home facing Carolina. It's basically tied for their biggest favorite. It does project that they would be 4-point favorites against Houston, but this is splitting hairs at that point. A couple other games where they are projected to be -3.5. They have home Tampa Bay, home Indy, home Washington. These are all going to be close to this one. So only thing is, for me, I think anybody who has paid attention to my content knows I'm very low on the Falcons. I think taking Desmond Ridder before he shows that he can at least play something close to league average quarterback level is pretty crazy. I wouldn't do it, but if you really like the Falcons, this is fine. And you're in a
Yeah,
big pool. Don't do it in a small pool.
totally agree on that. I need to see it first from the Falcons. I understand, like, the more I thought about it and more I thought about the market steam on the Falcons with their season long props and win totals, division futures. I get it. Offensive line could be the second best in football behind the Eagles. Spent a ton of money on defense. But, Art Smith almost criminally underutilized Kyle Pitts last year after spending a top 5 pick on him. They use another very high pick to take a running back when they already had a 1,000-yard rusher as a rookie. Made no sense to me. So I'm not sure this is a smart coaching staff. I think the way they tend to play with slow paces makes it more likely that you're going to have variance from week to week. Now they have an overall pretty easy schedule, but I think you're going to have a lot of sweats here with this team in the fourth quarter. I don't see the Falcons going out and winning
No,
games
they're going to be
by
in a lot of close
margin.
games. They want to win every game 20-17.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of that was trying to cover up their defense and keep them off the field last year. So, but I need to see that he's willing to open up this offense first a little bit before I get excited. So, yeah, it's a wait and see for the Falcons for me. You mentioned some spots maybe in the future where you can play them against Houston or, maybe Tampa Bay is packed in it at that point in week 7, and then really late in the year they have a game against Indianapolis. So, it's a wait and see for me, and I'm just very low on the Bears. I have the Packers rated higher than the Bears going into this season. So I already bet the Packers to win that game. So no way in the world I would pick the Bears in Survivor this week, even if you're trying to go contrarian. So, all right, Mo, as we wrap up here, Matt and I always like to kind of give our top 3 picks for Survivor for the week. So we'll do the same here. We'll start with you. Your top 3 picks for Survivor in week 1.
Washington, Seattle, Baltimore.
Okay, I like that. Same top 2 for me, Washington and Seattle. And just given the fact that I will never pick the team that's the most popular pick, I'm going to leave the Ravens off my list. If you disagree with that and just want to try and get the biggest favorite through, by all means, go right ahead. Just know that like half your pool might be taking them as well. So number 3, but like a teardrop as wide as the red frickin' sea between 2 and 3 here. Clear top 2 of the Commanders and the Seahawks for me. After that, I would probably go Jacksonville against the Colts, but not anywhere near as comfortable as the top 2 picks there. So we're aligned, Mo. I like it. What could possibly go wrong, Mo? I mean, easy game, right?
I mean, the Ravens could never lose. The Colts could never lose to the Texans week 1.
Oh my God. Last year might have been the most carnage. Like, folks, we were so worried about people losing interest in Survivor last year because of all the carnage in week 1. We didn't think anybody was going to read the Survivor column anymore. That's how nuts week 1 was last year. Thankfully, everybody still read it. It was great. We'll see if there's that much carnage in week 1 this year. You just never know. That's the beauty of the NFL. So we'll see how it goes. Again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments who you are taking in Survivor in week 1. Again, the links are in the description if you want to see Mo's full column with the win probability tool and also all the survivor pools that are available for you to start the 2023 season. Beat the Closing Line will be back again on Thursday with Mo and Eli locking in their full betting cards for week 1. The Mega Pod returns on Friday. Matt Brown, Adam Candy, and myself, Steven Andress, going through every single game for week 1 and our thoughts. We'll share our bets there as well. And again, lastly, go to thelines.com, top right-hand corner, hit the Discord button. That's where everybody is talking about the NFL and betting ideas 24/7, 365. If you go to the Roll server, hit the emojis, you will get push notifications to your Discord app on your smartphone anytime anybody on our staff locks in a bet, so you know what we're thinking, when we're thinking it, and that you can get the best number if you're interested in following those bets as well. For Mo Nawara, I'm Steven Andress. Best of luck in Survivor in week number 1.